Okay, good afternoon or good evening. I will first of all briefly introduce myself. And I got my PhD degree in genetics from Iowa State University in '97. And after 3 years of postdoc experience at the Salk Institute, I worked briefly for a company, and then I decided to go back to academics. So I joined that institute called Donald Danforth Plant Science Center in St. Louis as a principal investigator. And 6 years ago, I came to Hong Kong to join Baptist University. And my research area is mainly on epigenetic and transcriptional control of stress responses and the signaling sensing of oxidative stress. Since I came to Hong Kong, I submitted 6 GRF proposals and 1 CRF, not including this year's GRF. I got all 7 grants, and I'm also a co-I or co-PI for 3 CRF and 1 ILE. While I was in US 8 years as a principal investigator, I got 1 NSF and 1 NIH. The NIH was for 5 years. And however, I would like to say in first 3 years as PI, I submitted 6 proposals, I got 0. And since 2005, I submitted 9 proposals, I got all 9. So it was really the unsuccessful experience that taught me how to write a successful grant. I will mention that again later. Okay, so for research proposals, scientific merits and feasibilities are the main criteria for judging quality of a proposal. For scientific merit, it needs to be significant. It needs to have a significant impact for the research field. It needs to have some novelties or originality. And the proposal also needs to be feasible. So for, basically, the reviewers will ask if approach are taken and experimental plans are suitable for achieving the goals, and whether the objectives are achievable, and whether you are the right person to achieve the goal or the objectives. Based on scientific merits and also feasibility, the reviewers will give you a score for your proposals. So in RGC system, typically if it's a perfect proposal, you will get a score of 5. If you have a reviewer give you 2 or 3, you might be in trouble in getting funded, particularly in biology and medicine panel, because the success rate was only about 25% this year. And several years ago, if your overall score of your proposal was 4, you will get it. But this year or last year, you need to have a 4.5. So your proposals need to be nearly perfect in order to get it. So that is not easy to achieve. And how to write successful grant applications, everyone might have their own opinions. So these are the points based on my experience. First of all, you really need to be very familiar with the field you are proposing to do. Or many of you might say, well, that's obvious, we all know that. And in the last several years, I have, or at least several professors in my university and also Chinese university asked me to look at their proposals. And I think I looked at 8, 9, or 10 proposals. 2 of those were successful, others were not successful. For those that was not successful, to my view, mainly it's because they were not really familiar with the field they are in their research field. For example, this year actually I read a proposal from environmental scientists, and she was proposing to do something about molecular biology of microorganisms. I looked at that. I said, well, if microbiologists are reviewing your proposal, your chance will not be very good. So in the end, she actually submitted to an engineering panel, because I think also agree that gave her a better chance. And also, I had one proposal for studying transcription factors in regulating some metabolism, but that PI never worked on transcription factor. So her proposal on how to study transcription factor was not really that up to date or for some of those techniques. So actually that, to me, that all other weakness was derived from unfamiliarity to the research field. So I think that's quite important. But the good thing is you can learn, right? If you are never work on transcription factor, and then you can learn how people, scientists are working on a transcription factor, what kind of techniques are available. Yeah. And another important point I would like to raise, particularly for biological related proposal, is that you really need to have a lot of preliminary data. Yeah. Now, proposal could be data-driven or hypothesis-driven, but biological study, those biological research grants are typically data-driven hypothesis. If you don't have a data, or you will not be able to have a nice hypothesis to test. And some people will use published data for forming hypothesis. You have to have works from other labs, to generate hypothesis. But typically, you also need to have your own data to test, to generate hypothesis and test hypothesis. Otherwise, reviewers might consider your proposal is kind of a fishing expedition. For example, if so your goal is to identify some protein markers associated with some cancer. If you just say, well, I will isolate proteins from cancer cells and normal cells, and using mass spec to identify markers, that is not likely a very successful proposal. You do need to identify some candidates already before you submit your proposal. So you need to plan ahead of time, way ahead of time. Okay? If you need to generate some critical data, then you need to do it ahead of time. And then when you submit proposal, you already have a very interesting leads. Okay? So that is also very important. So these kind of preliminary data also give reviewers to believe that you are already making good progress. So that is part of feasibility that you will be judged by reviewers. And you need to be ambitious, but not too ambitious, because ambitious is somehow related to a significance or impact of your proposal. Okay? But too ambitious is also problematic. Generally, you need to focus on one or two important questions. Okay? And another important thing is your proposal need to be it need to be simple and easy to read. Okay? And if reviewers have a difficulty to understand what you write, and it's quite unlikely that the reviewer will be on your side. Okay? So you need reviewers to be kind of relaxing while reading your proposals, instead of asking reviewers to figure out things. Okay? So that is also pretty important to me. Now, a summary of a proposal could be the most part of your proposal. I think some reviewers, maybe even some panel members, might not be able to read your whole proposals. They might just look at your abstract and make some judgment. So you need to have an abstract, a summary, that the reviewers will get a general picture of quality of your proposal and what you are proposing to do. Okay, so generally, I will put my summary more like a miniature of my proposal. So it has very brief introduction, and then I will put some of preliminary data or pilot data to it, and then also have a hypothesis or have a question to be addressed, and then goals and the approach to achieve the goal. And so these are kind of things I will consider when I put together a summary. For objectives, I think one things I noticed is that for many proposals, objectives are more like goals or aims, too simple. For example, this is for my proposal. Okay, that's my objectives. So if someone will just say, well, the objective is to identify, say, redox-sensitive proteins in Arabidopsis, but that is too simple. That is goal, not really objective. For objectives, you do need to say what is the approach you are going to take to achieve that goal, and what kind of, say, materials will be used for achieve their objectives. So you do need a long sentence or one or two sentences for each objectives. And then your experimental plan, you'll need to use some new technique, and not necessarily novel technique, but cutting-edge technique should be used to address many important biological questions. So if you are working on transcription factors, you try to identify the targets of these transcription factors. These days, perhaps you do need to say you are going to take ChIP-seq approach to identify them, instead of just say, I will select some candidate and see which one might be direct targeted by transcription factor. Yeah. And your research plan needs to be sufficient, but not too much detail. Otherwise, it's a little bit kind of boring. Okay? And you do need to mention some pitfalls and alternatives to avoid some criticisms. If a reviewer say, well, that objective cannot be achieved by that approach, then you are in trouble. So you need to let the reviewer be aware that you are aware of other approach that might be taken. You don't need to put much details for alternative approaches, but your mentioning an alternative approach will help you to solve those kind of weaknesses. Okay. And of course, you also need to make reviewers excited. If a reviewer read your proposals, feel that, well, it's a waste of time, then you are not likely to get very good high score. But if reviewer feel that, well, by reading through your proposal, he or she learned something that might be even helpful for his or her own study, then you will likely to get a high score. So make reviewers happy, right? So that's quite important. Okay, so I copied a slide from NIH, a presentation by NIH manager for some common reasons for not successful applications. These including like lack of new ideas, or unfocused research plan, lack of knowledge of published relevant work, or lack of experience in the methodology, and also others, including like, say, unrealistic large amount of work, or lack of sufficient experimental details. I would like to also point out two more things for successful grant application. One is you do need to have a high quality publications these days, particularly for biological biology-related, medicine-related proposals. A large number of publications perhaps are not that critical, but high quality publications. If you say in your CV, you put 5 publications all published in same year, say this year, but if none of those publications is in a high impact journal, the chance will not be that high. Yeah. And another thing is, as I mentioned earlier, you need to learn from unsuccessful applications. And generally, I will say reviewers' comments are mostly right. Okay? You might not happy. You might feel some of negative comments are biased. I do believe majority of those negative comments are right. Okay? That's my experience in my failed applications, first 6 applications. And also you learn more from negative comments to improve your proposal than positive comments. So don't be frustrated if you cannot get first one or second one or third one, and you can learn, and you'll have a more chance, much better chance later to make it successful. And also, if you need to try to establish collaborations with other colleagues in your university or other universities in Hong Kong, because many funding opportunities these days are collaborative research like CRF, AOE. I think about 4 million of my research grants are from those collaborative projects. Okay, so those are my experience, and I don't know if I address the question now or later.
Just now.
Oh, okay. So any question?
May I know if there are any questions for Professor Xia? If not, we may go to next presentations. Thank you, Professor Xia.